Hello and welcome to Pluralsight. My name is Tim Warner, and this module is entitled Troubleshooting Printers. Let's buzz through the Pluralsight learning path for the CompTIA A+ 22901 certification exam. The first course is very brief and serves as an introduction. Then we get into each of the content domains from the 22901 exam, namely hardware, networking, mobile devices, and this is actually the final module in the troubleshooting course. Congratulations if you've been following these movies sequentially. You've covered a lot of ground and picked up many new skills. As I said, this is the last module in the troubleshooting course. Let's look at how far we've come. The first module dealt with the CompTIA troubleshooting model itself, and then for all the rest of our time actually, we've applied the model to practical symptom resolution pairs for the motherboard, the storage subsystem, the display, network, mobile devices, and then here we are today studying printer troubleshooting. By way of overview, we're going to look at, and you probably know this slide if you've been following sequentially. We're going to look at common symptoms and resolutions and technician tools, but of course focusing our effort at printing. Let's get started. Meanwhile, in the real world, a couple common questions you're likely to see because certainly in business, printing is still front and center and is a daily task of the repair technician. You may be asked, maybe by a small business owner, is it safe to refill toner? I spent a lot of money on my laser printer, they might tell you. I want to save costs as much as possible. I buy refill kits for my inkjet printer at home. How does that work in the laser world? Another question is there a Kickstarter for my local printer? And I'm not referring to the Kickstarter website for raising funds. I'm talking about, is there a secret sauce? Some little trick that I can use that when my local printer, say my USB connected printer, isn't working. I've tried banging the side of the printer, but that doesn't seem to work. We'll revisit these questions at the end of the module, as has become our custom. Our CompTIA A+ 22901 objective is 4.6, which is the last objective in the entire 22901 exam, so once again, congratulations. Given a scenario, troubleshoot printers with appropriate tools. Common symptoms and resolutions. All right, let's unfurl those. We have quite a few CompTIA provided symptoms, and let's discuss these one at a time. These are actually really good symptoms. CompTIA did an especially good job here in the printer module, because in my experience as a repair technician, I've seen every single one of these symptoms and resolved them myself. First, what about streaking? The printout has streaks, either black ink or multicolor if it's a color-capable printer. Most common cause on laser printers for streaked output is that the toner level's getting too low, so we're not able to apply a nice even coat of toner on the imaging drum. Dirty rollers and print nozzles may also be at play. Now, to fix low toner, you can simply replace the toner pack. Remember that the toner includes most of the components of the laser printing process. We covered laser printing and its process in great detail earlier in the learning path. Depending upon where the dirty rollers are, if they're inside the toner, replacing the toner cartridge should fix it. But if they're rollers outside of the toner, you can use a maintenance kit to fix those. On an inkjet printer, the most common cause of streaks are clogged up or empty print nozzles. Remember that in an inkjet printer, the ink buckets and their associated nozzles are what spray the ink onto the paper. Now, faded prints means that we're getting much lighter, lower quality output than we want. You'll want to check the properties of the printer. In software on the user's computer specifically, note that when you deploy a printer to a user, they may have privilege to change some of their own print jobs' print settings. By contrast, if it's a network printer, you as an administrator may globally have a toner setting enabled that even if a user specifies a high quality printout, it's still coming out faded. So you'll want to second guess yourself if you've chosen that. For inkjet printers, again, clogged print nozzles. And when you have that problem, the most common solution is to replace the inkjet bottle or bottles. Figure out which ones are clogged You can try to unclog them yourself, but I haven't had the greatest luck with that. A ghost image is where you're getting two layers of printout. For instance, a user prints out a page of text, and you see the text in one image as it should be, and you see the text sort of offset like a drop shadow, effectively duplicating what's on the screen. There you've probably got a problem with the imaging drum wiper blade, and in a laser printer that's contained inside the laser cartridge, so you'll want to put in a new toner to fix that problem. It also could be a problem with the fuser assembly. That's a good thing if you have a maintenance kit, because most laser printer maintenance kits have replacement fuser assemblies. Are you getting the picture here? I think we're seeing in large part fixing laser printer problems, at least in the majority of cases, is going to result in swapping out a new toner cartridge and or cleaning the unit with or without parts from a maintenance kit. We'll roll out 3 more now. What if the toner isn't fusing correctly to the paper? If you're having fusing problems where you have toner and incomplete characters on the page, that again is going to require that you replace the fuser assembly from your maintenance kit. Creased paper is going to be a physical transfer issue. You might have pinched paper guides. For instance, the inkjet printer that my wife and I have at home has several input trays, and one has expandable or flex paper guides where you can adjust the width to determine if you're going to print from envelopes or legal paper or standard paper or A4 paper. Make sure that the guides in your appropriate printer trays are sized appropriately. You'll also want to double check the paper width. You may be specifying an envelope, but there's really full-sized paper in there, or vice versa. If the paper's just not feeding, again, that's going to be a lower level physical problem. You'll want to go to the maintenance kit on your laser printer and replace the pickup rollers. Recall that the pickup rollers are what pulls one sheet at a time, ideally, from the paper tray. On old impact printers, we don't want to forget about the dot matrix printer, do we? The tractor feed tension may be off, and you'll want to consult the manual if you can find it, and you may need to take a small screwdriver or a wrench and adjust the tension of the tractor feed so that it's matched on both left and right sides. Let's look at some more. First, we have paper jam. This is probably the most common symptom that you'll find, and in my experience, if you can train your end users how to resolve their own paper jams, then you've helped everybody be more productive. This could also result from paper that is too thick for the paper path, especially in educational environments. For instance, helping teachers in elementary schools where they're using different construction papers and papers that may not be intended for putting through a laser printer. You may have that particular problem, and you might need to do one sheet at a time with the thicker paper rather than put a pile of it in one of the stack trays. You also want to look at the paper itself. Is it damp? Is it creased? You'll want to educate your users because they're going to replace paper, I guarantee it. And you want to make sure that they're putting in paper correctly. Have them ruffle the paper on all 4 sides to sort of loosen up the pages to lessen the likelihood of their sticking together, and instruct your end users to make sure that there's no creased paper pages. Remove those from the stack before putting them in the printer tray. If it's a network or local printer that doesn't have any connectivity, look at layer 1. If it's a network printer and the RJ45 plug is unplugged, well, you've probably figured out your problem. Likewise, if the USB connector on either the printer side or the user's computer side isn't all the way plugged in, same thing. With a local printer, you can easily unplug from one USB port to another one to bring the local printer back up. Otherwise, you may want to power cycle the printer and or reboot the user's computer. If even after plugging in a network printer you're still not getting a connection, you'll want to look at the laser printer's on-screen display and verify that it has a valid IP address, and then just apply standard network troubleshooting from there. Perhaps there's a problem with the switch port that the printer's plugged into. Maybe the entire switch is offline, although that's a much bigger problem in most cases. Finally, on this page, the user may just see gobbledygook or garbled characters on their paper instead of legible text. In most cases, this is a corrupted or missing device driver, and you'll want to double check the driver that the user has on their system and reinstall that driver, and in particular, the correct version of that printer driver. If the driver checks out and they still are printing garbled characters, you'll often want to check with another system. If it's a local printer, bring your laptop over, plug the local printer into your device, and run a print job. That's actually a very common troubleshooting method called split half. If, for instance, you're able to print ungarbled characters on the paper, but your friend, your user, is printing garbled characters, then you can say that the problem in all likelihood exists on the user's computer and is not a problem with the printer itself. But nonetheless, you want to look at layer 1 and look at the cables in play and/or network ports if it's a network printer. And the hits keep on coming. Vertical lines on page is always a distressing output. That again points to toner cartridge problems. It could be low toner where we're getting insufficient feed of the toner. It could be a defect in the cartridge. That's a particularly bitter pill to swallow for people who buy their toner cartridges one at a time, because if you get a lemon, I hope that you have some recourse to get a replacement or a refund. I often recommend that businesses purchase subscriptions to toner cartridges and actually purchase memberships with printer maintenance companies that, while they lower the overall cost of ownership, in my opinion, for printers, but makes the impact of a lemon toner cartridge a little bit less. That's another discussion that's beyond our scope, though. For inkjet printers, you'll want to see if maybe by some goofy action of the printer that the printer has sprayed some inkjet ink on the feed rollers. That's not a good situation, of course, because you're going to be transferring ink where it shouldn't go. You'll want to do your best to clean that up, to clean both the inkjet bottles and the print heads and also the feed rollers themselves. Now, how about for a network printer, a backed up print queue? You're going to get support calls saying, I submitted a print job 5 minutes ago. It's normally processed immediately, but it's stuck. Chances are you're going to get a number of people angry that their documents aren't printing, and maybe there'll be some people pointing fingers saying, you sent a 400-page print job. No, I didn't. I didn't send any. Well, I sent just a 1-page print job, and so forth. Well, the printer itself may be offline. It may be administratively offline. Maybe a technician was working on it and forgot to put it back online. You'll want to go into the printer's on-screen display or web management portal and make sure that the printer is actually supposed to be processing print jobs. As an administrator, you can do things like pause or unpause the entire queue. You can pause or unpause individual print jobs. You can clear the print queue. You may have to do that as a last-ditch effort and then just instruct your users, sorry for the inconvenience, could you please resubmit your print job? Now, in environments where users are printing long, big documents, now I say long, big documents, long meaning hundreds of pages, big meaning perhaps PowerPoint slide decks with big vector images on them and so forth, the printer may choke because it runs out of memory. Remember, laser printers have RAM that they use as buffer space as those pages, those page images come in from your users. You may need to instruct the user on their side to print in a draft mode or a lower resolution. If they don't need high quality output, by all means encourage them not to specify it. You as a print queue administrator can force that resolution on your end. Ultimately, though, if you find that this isn't an anomaly but is a fairly regular occurrence, I've supported plenty of artists and draftsmen and architects, so I know in those cases you will want to supersize the printer's RAM. In fact, the amount of installed and expandable RAM would guide your purchase decisions in the first place, it seems to me. Let's see what else we have here. Another network printing problem. A user says, I get an access denied error when I try to print. Now that should cause you to scratch your head because I hope the user wouldn't even have the printer in their printer's folder in Windows if they didn't have access to the thing, right? There's a common security principle, IT security principle called least privilege, where systems administrators, our goal is to give users enough privileges such that they can do their jobs, but we're not giving them extra privileges that they don't need. We want to accomplish a lot of things, actually. We want to improve the security of our network, and we want to reduce support calls on our side. That having been said, we may need to modify the printer permissions. Maybe we overlooked a user. It's actually best practice when you're giving groups of users permissions to use things like printers. Don't give permissions on a user-by-user basis. Instead, put users with similar access requirements together into a group and then give the permissions one time to the group. That way you have convenience and you have modularity. That is, if a user transitions out of that group, their user account may leave that that group, but you don't have to actually change the permissions. Just the fact that that user account would no longer be in that group anymore means that the user would no longer have permissions to use the printer. You see what I mean? Now, how about the printer will not print? It's not access denied. It's not that the user can see his or her print job that's just stuck. The printer's just not going to print. Well, you'll again want to check the toner cartridge, check the ink levels if it's an inkjet printer, and just the overall status. Can you connect to the printer's web interface? If not, that's a pretty clear indication the printer is offline, and you may need to hike it on over physically, what we call sneaker net, to physically inspect the printer. What if a color printer prints in the wrong print colors? Well, very simply, nowadays, color laser and color inkjet printers involve several toner cartridges or inkjet bottles, respectively, of different colors. And if one of those colors are gone, then by definition, the printer is not going to be able to use that color in print jobs and may do a substitution. Another problem is if the inkjet printer simply can't squirt the ink out of a particular color due to a clog, you got that problem. I think we're seeing a pattern here, another one. I mentioned the pattern about the laser printers, the toner, and the maintenance kits. That's true. But on the inkjet side, you'll see that those inkjet bottles, because they have the print nozzle integrated, it's easier than I would like it to be for those things to get clogged up. More symptoms and resolutions. Unable to install printer. Well, chances are this is a problem that you as an administrator are going to see because we're tasked with installing printers for the users whom we support. Do we have privilege ourselves to install a printer? In Active Directory, you do, which is Microsoft's directory service, you'll need to have administrative privileges to deploy printers. If you're a technician, you may have only a standard user account and you may need to ask for help. You'll also want to check user rights. Some organizations, in my experience much smaller shops, give users local administrator capabilities on their computers so the user can technically do what they want on their own system, but they don't have that level of privilege elsewhere on the network. I don't agree with that approach myself, although I understand why administrators do it. User rights means, does the user have the ability himself or herself to install their own printer? And your mileage may vary on whether you're going to allow that. How about error codes? This is a problem that I like to see simply because a particular error code at least gives you some insight into the specifics of a printing problem. RTFM, remember, stands for Read the Friendly Manual. We want to be really competent and confident with all the printers that we support in our business. In most printer manuals, in the back, you'll have a troubleshooting section that lists the most common error codes specific to that printer and the reason why those codes appear. Of course, Google is your friend, so you'll want to open up your friendly search engine and do a search on the error code. Now, here's a pro tip for you. If you get not only a code, but a little bit of text, write that down. And make sure when you Google as much of that as possible, because the more specific information you can put into your search engine, the more specific and targeted your results will be. Now, how about printing blank pages? I'm not talking about the pickup rollers grabbing more than one page. I'm talking about the printer appearing to work, but spitting out warm blank pages. This is a problem that may have an extraordinarily simple solution. Did you remove the toner sealing tape? In other words, did you unblock the portal on the laser print toner? I know you're thinking, Tim, that's silly. Why would anybody do that? Look, as a busy IT tech, sometimes you're going to feel like a chicken with its proverbial head cut off. You'll be running around in all different directions. It's easier than you think to make this kind of error. In an inkjet environment, again, clogged print nozzles come to save the day. Not. The fastest way to fix that is either to try to unclog the nozzle, which I don't have a lot of good luck with myself, or replace the inkjet bottle, which is, in most cases, what I do. We have just one more symptom. Boy, this has been quite a marathon, hasn't it? No image on printer display. This means we walk up to the laser printer, let's say. There's no LCD display at all. It's just blank. This could mean that the printer's turned off or sleeping, and you can simply wake it up by pressing some non-intensive button. Now, what do I mean by non-intensive? Here's another pro tip. When you walk up to a computer that is sleeping, what key do you use to wake up the computer? I hope you don't press something like Enter. What if the computer was in a state prior to it going to sleep where it was ready to quit an application and the dialog box said, do you want to save your work, yes or no? And no was actually the active selection. If you press enter, there's a chance that that enter can be captured by the application and you've just done something that you don't want to, and that user may not be happy. So I recommend that when you're waking up a device, whether it's a computer, a printer, whatever, use an innocuous key. If it's a full keyboard, I'll use the Shift key because that's enough to wake up a computer, but Shift isn't going to do anything else on the machine. It's not even going to permanently change the case. Similarly, on the printer, hit back or cancel. I mean, the worst that can happen is that it'll take you out of whatever screen it was in before it slept. But if you know how the printer and the on-screen display works, that shouldn't be a problem. If the printer is on and it has power, but you're not seeing anything on the display, that's going to be a defect in the display panel itself. It could be that its power cable has become unplugged, and where you're going to go from there is if you have a support agreement, you're going to file a ticket, or if you're brave and comfortable with electronics, you may try to repair it yourself. Be careful though, because you may be violating a warranty, and if you make the problem worse, it's going to cost your company much more because it won't be a warranty replacement anymore. It'll be considered user error. Technician tools. This is all review, really, from what we covered earlier in the learning path. The maintenance kit is something you should have at least one of for each and every one of the printers at your business. The maintenance kit is going to include all of the key components of the process, the various rollers, the fuser assembly, the common most worn pieces in a printer, in other words. These are in fact matched to make and model of specific printers, so you'll want to be very careful to double check maintenance kits against the make and model printers that you have. That having been said, it's a huge sigh of relief you'll feel if you see that the fuser assembly's messed up on a computer and you can make a less than 5-minute repair by swapping it out. The toner vacuum. Now this brings up two issues. The issue of just maintaining a printer. We've talked earlier about isopropyl alcohol and microfiber cloths and so on. If you have loose toner, if you have a printer that maybe has a toner cartridge defect and some raw toner has spilled inside the printer chassis, you want to purchase a vacuum that's intended for computers and printers specifically. You'll notice that this vac has a very industrial strength chamber because we need to remember that toner is not to be breathed. It's a biologically hazardous material. And that is one of the big reasons why I personally don't believe in refilling your own toner cartridges. You can do that. Go on YouTube if nothing else, and you can watch some tutorials, but you're going to need to invest in a respirator mask. You'll need to have a ventilated, dedicated area in your organization to do it because, like I said, inhaling toner particles is a big deal in a bad way. The other thing that these electronics or computer vacuums do, besides make it safer to pick up hazardous material like toner particles, is that it's an anti-static device. Remember that static electricity is anathema to computer systems, especially mechanical hard drives. Compressed air is an inexpensive way to clean gunk out of a printer. Now, you want to be careful with laser printers. If it's just a tiny, tiny amount of toner, okay, then perhaps you can use compressed air to dispel that from the case. But if it's a significant spill, I wouldn't suggest using compressed air. You're just going to distribute the particles more onto your clothing, onto your skin, and potentially even into your lungs. CompTIA wants us to know a little bit more about print spoolers. This can be taken multiple different ways, but I took CompTIA to mean that on a network print device, that print device is going to have RAM, volatile space, non-permanent storage space, and it's going to have a small hard disk. And in conjunction, those storage systems and the circuitry of the printer itself will receive pages, page images that are coming across the network from users who are allowed to use the printer, and each page image is, well, spooled or temporarily stored in the printer's printing subsystem. And as we learned earlier in the learning path with the laser printer process, the printer prints one page at a time, conveniently enough. Now, print spooler is actually part of a local printer as well. So on your home computer, you may have a USB cabled inkjet printer. In Windows, there's a background service called, appropriately enough, the print spooler service that maintains how print images are temporarily cached on the hard drive and then ultimately despooled from the spool folder back to the printer and then on the printed page. A nice quick fix you should know for Windows systems is a command line utility called net. We've talked about net earlier. I believe it was the previous module. I mentioned that it's sort of an old-fashioned Swiss Army knife command line tool in Windows. Well, if you use net stop and net start, that's how you can take control over system services. So what I recommend people do who say, I've got stuck print jobs, my printer's acting wonky, I've power cycled it and it's still doing the same thing. Well, by power cycling the local printer, that's not going to do anything to your computer's spooler folder. So you'll want to open up a command prompt or a Windows PowerShell session and type net stop spooler. That'll stop the spooler service. Then immediately start it up again, net start spooler. That is a really quick fence when helping users with local print problems, not network, but local. For network printers, an administrator can restart the spooler service on the network printer in any number of different ways. Now let's return to the real world and revisit those two questions, the first of which we just talked about. Is it safe to refill your own laser toner? Well, it depends. It depends on whether you have a respirator mask, whether you have a ventilated dedicated area. Technically, it's possible to do toner refills in a safe way, but in my experience, in most cases, it's messy, time-intensive, and unreliable. Look at it this way. If you mess up in the tiniest degree, you've effectively botched the entire toner cartridge. When you're putting the toner back in, any spillage or even using your hands, hopefully you're wearing rubber gloves or latex gloves, but if not, if you're using bare hands, bad thing, any transfer of skin oils to the toner cartridge is going to produce a clump of toner and inconsistent print output. I would say that unless you work for an enterprise organization that has a dedicated capability to do toner refill, stay away from it and just replace the entire cartridge. Note that that's not Pluralsight's opinion or CompTIA's opinion, that's Tim Warner's opinion. As far as a quick Kickstarter for a local printer, don't kick the printer. Instead, try that net stop or net start command to restart the spooler service and see if that helps. If not, then you'll have to go to your next step in troubleshooting, but it's a nice quick fix to try. For homework, I challenge you to find an old broken printer. Go to a garage sale or a yard sale. Go to eBay or an auction site. There are people who want to make just a few bucks, let's say, off an old laser printer, inkjet printer that they don't need or they don't want. They may say it's broken, but it may not actually be permanently broken. Once you have the printer, look up the manual online and see if you can disassemble and reassemble the unit. Now, is that harder than I'm saying? Yeah, definitely, because printers are only meant to be disassembled to a certain point, but because this is an old broken printer, the idea is you want to learn all of the inner mechanics of the printer. Now, am I suggesting you crack open a toner cartridge? Well, you can do that if you want. I'm not going to formally recommend it. It is a good educational exercise, but I'm not going to formally recommend that. But as long as that old and broken printer is unplugged and far away from all electrical sources, you may learn a lot more than you did prior to doing this kind of surgery. For further learning, check out John O'Neill's course, Windows 8 Managing and Maintaining, Part 2. There's a module in there called Printing that's a good supplement to what we've covered here. Also, Ed Lieberman in his old CompTIA A+ course, Part 3, Peripherals and Best Practices, he spends an entire hour discussing all things printers, so you can supplement what I've taught you about printers with what Ed teaches. Remember, take advantage of the fact that at Pluralsight we have a very broad and very deep library. In summary, it's good and bad, in my humble opinion, that so much of the laser printing process is contained in the toner. I mean, it's good because you can swap the toner cartridge out and the user's good to go and they're happy and you're on to your next task. It's bad because those toner cartridges are expensive. Simple as that. Also, take away the knowledge that printer maintenance is an entry-level skill that's used every workday. Now, what do I mean? If you're going to be in IT, or if you are in IT, brand new, you're probably not going to get a senior level position as your first job. You're going to get an entry level position. And there you tend to get what's called the scut work, the day-to-day, quote-unquote, boring stuff that more experienced systems administrators don't want to do. Chief among that scut work is maintaining network printers, so get used to it. Well, that's the course. In fact, that's not only the course, that is the entire 22901 learning path. Congratulations from the bottom of my heart for studying all of that content. You're now just about the whole way to passing your 22901 exam. You're probably thinking, Tim, what do you mean just about the whole way? I say just about because you need to get hands-on experience, so keep on practicing, and you'll also want to invest in a quality exam simulation software. Practice exams are good because not everybody is comfortable taking a computer-based test, and remember that the CompTIA exams are all computer-based tests that consist of multiple choice items as well as some basic simulation items. Now, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, curiosities, my email address is timothy-warner@pluralsight.com, and you can also, I've mentioned this a lot, on the website when you're watching these courses, there's a discussion tab where you can type in your questions and I will answer them. I'm here for you. I'm your instructor. So with that, I just want to say that I've put a bonus course together for you in which it's full motion video. I went out to Schaumburg, Illinois, where the IT Ops group at Pluralsight lives, and we spent the day doing some really cool recording. I took a PC apart all the way down, removed the motherboard, bare case. That'll give you some really nice visualization of what we covered over the previous, I don't know how many hours. And I also include some content, some research skills and computer math that will keep you in very good stead, not only for your exam, but in your career. Thanks very much. Best of everything to you. Take care.